in?
Yep.
Alright, so today I'm going to be refuting Beatrice's claim that, her claim of fact. Her main claim is that video games affect the human mind to act out in violence. Her first supporting claim is the exposure that children have on video games affect their attitude towards violence. Her second supporting claim is that game socialization are influenced by widely practicing. Her third supporting claim is some people eventually will not be able to spread life from reality. Alright, so starting off, her first supporting claim obviously is the exposure that children have on video games affect their attitude towards violence. The only evidence used was assumption that children, because of older siblings, video games are in the house already, or that the parents, are buying the games for the children. This wasn't cited. It's kind of a broad assumption, and in context, it's kind of irrelevant towards the supporting claim. It doesn't really support the claim that attitudes towards the violence are affected. Alright, so moving on to the second supporting claim, game socialization are influenced by widely practicing. I think what she meant by it was like the interaction with the games on a constant basis are a form of the influence. The first piece of evidence offered was an assumption that by playing a game repeatedly, a child learns from it. There's no inference made between the child learning and his attitudes towards violence. It's just a fact given. Another piece of evidence had to do with a study that by repeating an activity, a child can conjure images of the virtual world. And I found that this evidence was uncited, and there were inferences made that the virtual world and reality become distorted or blurred. And without hard evidence, you can't really back that up. Alright, so moving on to the third supporting claim, that some people eventually will not be able to spread life from reality. Some evidence provided was an assumption made that some people are not capable of distinguishing reality and the virtual world, therefore acting out violently like in the game. Let's see. This kind of is jumping to a conclusion, and it really undermines the main claim that by telling us only some people are affected, is it only just some people, or do video games in general just really have an effect on the human mind? Another piece of evidence here was Brandon Krim, a journalist, was paraphrased, ultimately stating that video games are more interactive than comic books. Well, I found this was more informative. It tells us something we already know. We know that video games are obviously more interactive than reading a book. Let's see. So it doesn't really help to support the main claim. More evidence was from Brad Brushman, a psychologist at Ohio State. Paraphrasing it, it claimed that in a study, video game play increased aggression in test subjects. Well, however, it doesn't state how long that aggression affects them. I mean, we know that games are competitive in nature, so obviously aggression is going to tend to occur. How is aggression temporary? What age group is affected the most? I think as evidence, it was all right, but I think it's too vague to draw an absolute conclusion from it. In conclusion, I think a lot of the evidence used were assumptions, and a lot of conclusions were jumped to. Thank you.
All right, Kevin, what you mainly did was try to analyze the evidence that the advocate's presenting and the reasoning that they're using. There's not really any attempt to offer any counter evidence to any of those claims or to counterclaims to suggest that there is a reason to disbelieve that what the advocate's talking about. That's okay, except of course that it means that you're always playing defense, you're not playing offense in some of these arguments. And your challenges, if they are stronger and effective, that's not a disadvantage to you to just take that position that the advocate is wrong because there's something wrong with their evidence and reasoning. The problem that I see with most of your argument is that most of the challenges that you make are mild criticisms of the evidence or the way it's being applied. There's a press here. It doesn't say this completely. It's about the kids learn. That's an assumption. And it doesn't necessarily mean that their attitudes are adjusted as a consequence. Well, I'm not sure I see a substantial difference between learning and the attitudes that the kids have. If what you learn suggests that this is right, those are your attitudes. So I think you may have a legitimate question here, but I'm not sure that it's a meaningful one. And so what's the impact of your argument here? At best, it just attempts to cloud the issue as opposed to refute the issue. And clouding the issue is a strategy, but I'm not sure that it's a very effective strategy. Same sort of thing when we get to the issue down below where you say, well, is it really about some people or is it about everybody who plays those games? I think the advocate suggested that it has the tendency to produce these outcomes. Obviously, it's not going to produce it in everybody. And you seem to suggest that by parsing this, there's something wrong with the advocate's argument. I just think that you're clarifying what the argument is, and that's a legitimate point to make, but does that clarification mean that the argument is incorrect or that we shouldn't believe it? And I don't think that that's really the conclusion that we can draw from your responses. So I'll tell you what it sounds like. It sounds to me like these are kinds of arguments that I use this as an example sometimes. These would be the kinds of responses I think you could give if you got up and immediately responded to the argument. In other words, forget having 2 weeks to prepare. You had to get up and answer the argument right after she spoke. I think you can make every one of the presses that you just made, just by thinking about it right then, and it doesn't really require much analysis. It's an instinctive counterpunch. They're okay, but they're not necessarily as convincing as they would be if you had developed even some proof to support your points here. All right. Thank you.